Right, first things first, take off the dust cover from the engine that I've had protected and make sure that all cylinders are re-wiped, make sure they're all nice and clean and the surfaces are good. I've already actually just done this job, and then I always put a bit of oil around the cylinders to make sure that it's well lubricated before I close things up. Right. Now, there's two different trains of thought here. Some people go like the manufacturer say and put on a head gasket totally dry. But then again, they also sell head gaskets. But I always like to put a little bit of oil on my head gaskets because it helps them spread out a little bit. And if there's any reason that you have to take it off after you've put it on after a short space of time, you've still got a very good gasket and it can be bolted back down. But if you bolt it down dry, there's a good chance that it could all stick, and that's it. You need another gasket. So this is pretty good practice, and I've done it both ways. I've done it totally dry, and I've done it by spraying it with lacquer first, which is basically just clear varnish paint. That's the gasket I'm talking about. And I generally do it with oil, never do it with grease, but I know that method's also used by some mechanics. I've never had any bad results with any of them. However, I do know they stick and tear up these paper gaskets when you are trying to remove them if they go on totally dry. Perfect for the manufacturer. So right, now let's go for a cylinder head. So, plugs are in, everything's dead right. There's a couple of dowels over here. That's what holds the gasket in place. And then, that is what I'm going to line up for the head. Quite heavy. And the older I get, the heavier it gets. Funny that. There you go, it's in place. Now I'm going to get all the bolts and everything and put it into place, and you'll see that. These are the existing cylinder head bolts. I'm not changing them because they're not very old. Manufacturers do recommend that they should be changed every time you change your head gasket. I've never known of one of actually ever failing. And it's quite important to put grease on the threads of each one, because these actually go down inside of the water jacket. So if you've got a seawater cooled engine, yeah, you don't want rust and that seizing that up and messing up the thread. So you really want to be able to remove that. So that's just good practice. Once the cylinder head has all been torqued down from the center outwards correctly, and everything's nice and tight, make sure that all of the push rod tubes where the oil travels is all nice and clean, and then each one of them just gets pushed straight into place. And afterwards the tappets can be assembled. And the nut goes with the flat side facing down. The top is squashed in 3 places because it's a type of lock nut. That stops it from undoing by itself. So that gets put on there, tightened up, and as you can see, I only just give it a couple of threads past that, and that's my preliminary check before turning the engine over and setting the clearance, which I'll show you now. So let me explain quickly about setting the tappets here. Although they're hydraulic tappets and you don't normally set them, once they're set they're done and they're self-adjusting. But you've got to put your first initial stages of setting there. So what you have to do is turn the engine over until you've got it on number 1. However, I've got a slightly retarded timing. So therefore my valve overlap and TDC for the camshaft is in that position a little bit later because of that. If you have a standard system, that'll be bang on the line. If you have an advanced timing, it'll be bang on there for a little bit before. So at this moment, what I've got is I've got this valve overlapping, which means one is opening and one is closing. That is not the firing point. That is 360 degrees out of firing. So now I've got to turn that over with a bar at 360 degrees so that I get that in line with the firing point, and then I'll set the valve. So it's been turned 360 degrees, one full revolution, until that lines up, and the camshaft has turned half that, 180 degrees. So therefore the cams now are, the high part of the cams are fully away from the push rods, which means that these are all loose now. So then what we do is we tighten up that nut until this plate just stops, and then a little bit more of a turn. And this one is set, and I turn it by half a turn. So that's backed off of the spring clip that's down there, and both of those are pretty tight now. But that's perfect because that will release, and the valve will close perfectly in a few moments. So now I'm using, I'm setting just bank 1 at the moment. So to set bank 1, I know I'm firing on number 1 cylinder. Now to get to the next one, I use the firing order list, which can be seen here. Okay, but number 1, and then these are all odd numbers on that bank that I've just put the cylinder head on. So 8 and 4 are even. That's on this side that hasn't been mounted yet. Number 3 is the next. Each firing is on 90 degree turn. So that is 90, 180, 270 is cylinder number 3 is the next one to set. So how do I do that? Well, I've got that on the mark there, and I turn that around. That's 180, and that's 90 degrees, which makes that 270. So at that point, I know that I can set cylinder number 3. 1, 3, that's there. Number 3 is set, so my next one is number 5, which is only 2 positions away, 90, 90, 180. So from where the bar is now, I turn it 180. Right, now I can set the next one. Last one to set on this cylinder bank is cylinder number 7, which is only another 90 degrees away. So we'll turn that 90 degrees. And that's the 90 degree. Last one. Just stop moving. Half a turn. Just stop moving. Half a turn. That half a turn is not an exact amount. It can be 3/4 of a turn, or even maybe 1 turn, but half a turn is sufficient to allow the full movement of the cam followers, the hydraulic valve lifters. Once I've completed one side, it's good practice just to turn it over 2 complete turns, just to make sure that there's no valves sticking or anything that would stop the engine from turning freely. It's still quite tight, but yeah, it's turning fine. In fact, I even give it more than a couple of turns, just to be sure. That's 4 revolutions, it's fine. Just to explain the timing mark and actually the tappet clearance and why I'd give those tappets an extra half a turn after they stop. At the moment the cylinders are firing on number 1. In actual fact it's just gone past top dead center, because that is the top dead center point of the cam, because it is retarded. So these two cams here, the lobes are fully down that way. So when I turn that extra half a turn, it pushes that hydraulic cam down so that there's a little bit of clearance underneath that clip. Otherwise that piston comes up and stops on that clip. But in actual fact you always want that push rod holding down on that piston, otherwise these tappets can start to become loose and start to rattle around, so you don't get the proper valve timing. So that's the reason why you turn that down by half. Okay, time for the second head to go on. When you're not filming, this job goes a whole lot faster. And here we are with the next cylinder head ready to go on. All things have been checked. The gasket is slightly oiled, and we put it onto place. Line it up with the dowels. The dowels are in place, and one bolt just at the bottom, just to make sure that we don't have any accidents. Okay, perfect. Done. So now bolt it down, torque it up, and set the tappet, same as the other side. Okay, so the second cylinder head is on. It's quite important actually to pre-torque all the nuts, which I'm just doing by hand here, gently like this, in an even manner from the center outwards. And there's something else that they don't teach you in college, is wet and dry torque. Basically, if there's grease on it and grease underneath the head of the nut as well, it will obviously turn more and create more stress than as if it was dry. So the torque wrench is a pretty good measure to have all the bolts the same tightness, but it's not absolutely perfect, because some bolts might turn much easier because of the reduction in friction. So just keep that in mind, that lubricate them all and everywhere, the heads and the threads, so at least you have something even when you're doing the job. The cylinder heads are on, the valve adjustment's done, and I've put the sump plug in. It's now time to get some mineral oil, not synthetic, because you run the engine in with normal, and just pour some engine oil inside of this engine. A bit over the tappets first around here, and obviously some around the valves or the camshaft. It's always good to lubricate all the parts that need lubricating. Try not to get the oil down inside of the inlets. That's the inlet for the air. There's no oil in there, it's fine. So I'll put 5 litres of oil into this, and then we'll prime it with the oil pump. Well, all looks great with a bit of oil in it, but I found an oil leak. Oh dear. Well, that's because I just forgot to put the sensor in. So I suppose I put the sensor in and bolt that up, and we got no more oil leak. That's fixed that. Normally you'd put the intake manifold on, and the distributor would go in and locate in the oil pump, and the oil pump is down there inside of that, and that would twist in a clockwise direction. So to prime the oil, what I've done is I've just put a screwdriver bit, long piece, not something that you attach on the end that can drop in the engine, but something that is pretty solid, and that I locate down onto the shaft that has got a slot in it, and I slowly turn the oil pressure up. I can hear the oil pump running now. And I hear the oil squirting up around.